So as I talk, the first thing that I say is, and I think an email was put out, there will be potentially some profanity that's used in this presentation. Additionally, while the videos that I show are not over-the-top graphic or anything like that, they are of a sensitive nature. A lot of them are recreations of things, and the second video is an actual victim of an active shooter assault. So if anybody needs to step out of the room, I understand. I typically, over the first portion of my career, gave presentations to law enforcement, and that was never kind of a disclaimer that I had to give. And then at one point, I was speaking with an organization that helped the financial needs of those that are mentally ill. And as I was giving the presentation, I started talking about a jumper that I had assisted negotiating. And whenever I was done with that, the individual that I had negotiated we had successfully talked down, and they ultimately hung themselves later. And I didn't, give this disclaimer like I do now. And there was a person in the room that was familiar with that person and was like, yeah, I knew them. They were friends with my son. So there are things that are going to be sensitive. Anybody needs to step out of the room or feels uncomfortable about anything, I completely understand that. But with that being said, we'll start with this portion of the presentation, and then we'll go to the second. If you could bring up the next slide. So we already talked about a lot of this, so we don't have to go over it again. This was in my background. These are some of the trainings that I've gone, and some of these I actually have instructor certifications for that have credentials that I can teach. And I've been a member of the York County Quick Response Team, which is the county SWAT team, for 19 years, and I've gone to numerous trainings for that, and then these are all the other classes that I'm either an instructor in or that I've had a background in, and the basis for the presentations that I'll talk about today. If you would, just go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So where this training comes from, first off, like I've said before, I don't have all the answers, and there may be something out there that works for somebody better than what I'm actually going to say. I will say that what I would generally speak on is best practices and is the most generally recognized, best acceptable ways of dealing with people. And whenever you're doing something, if this is something that you're talking about in a work environment or something that while you're at another place like this, it's important to be mindful of policies and procedures that are already set in place whenever you're doing anything. Never be afraid to get help from others. I think one of the things that I have recognized, and one of the things that has made me more successful as I've gotten older, is that originally whenever I was doing things in the past, I felt that I had to do them solely and on my own. And as I've matured and moved forward in life, I've realized that there are a lot of things that we need help with from others, and that we have to recognize that and then try and do that as we're dealing with things. And always try and have some answer or solution. Whenever I was a patrol officer, people would call me to come out and deal with whatever issue they may have. And whenever I was talking to them or dealing with them, there were things that people would call me about that were not a criminal matter, they were not a civil matter, they were not a police matter, but they had an issue that they felt that they needed to be helped out with. And there were times where I could not help them. However, if there was some assistance that I could give them or some remedy for the problem that they had, I found that it was always beneficial. Somebody would have, a minor problem with their neighbor. It wasn't a criminal thing. It wasn't a harassment. It wasn't anything like that. And I would say, well, you know what? If you're upset that your neighbor's grass is too high, you could go down and complain to codes. This isn't something that the police department's really going to deal with, but it is something that, you can try and remedy in this way. And I felt that giving somebody an answer that was coming to you with a question or a problem was generally very helpful and solved a lot of the issues that were going on. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So as I talk, like I said before, if you have any, if you need to step out, that's fine. Ask questions. If there are questions, I will generally ask you to wait until the end of the presentation. And if there are some things that are kind of off topic or you have a question about that doesn't really relate to what I'm going over right now, then just meet with me afterwards and I'll hang out for a little bit and we can have a conversation about that. The time's a little limited today with everything that I want to go over, so I want to just try and stay on course with everything I'm doing. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So dealing with difficult persons. The first thing that I always say is the golden rule. Treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. So that's with respect. That's with some kind of understanding. What if you were having a terrible day and lost your patience? How would you want someone to talk to you? What if this was an elderly disabled relative? What if you knew you were dealing with someone who was intellectually, developmentally disabled or mentally ill? Would you still be talking to them the same, or would you be talking to them differently? And generally, I use this with officers or employees that work for a facility, and they're like, these people come in and they just like really irritate me. I don't know how to deal with them. I lose my patience, and I can tell you that over my course as a patrolman for the city, like I dealt with a lot of people that would call, they would be mentally ill, they would be having a problem, and nobody knew how to deal with them. I do not claim to be a subject matter expert, but I have an extensive amount of training, background, and experience with mentally ill. So I tell the watermelon story. And I tell this story because there are people that when dealing with somebody else, if they look at the background behind what's going on, their behavior and attitudes toward an individual changes. So the watermelon story. I was still patrolman with the city, so we're probably talking 6, 7, 8 years ago. There was an incident that happened out at Route 30 and Pennsylvania Avenue. There was an individual in the parking lot where Old Navy is right now, right along Route 30. This individual, they were selling watermelons there. A young man had come across, picked up a watermelon and threw it at a car in the parking lot. Smashed it on the window. He then jumped on the hood of the moving car that was in the parking lot and started pounding on the hood of the car. The individual drove forward. The young man fell off the car. He jumped back up on the hood of the car, started pounding on the car again, picked up another watermelon, threw it at the car. The car crossed over Pennsylvania Avenue. The individual called 911. Officers responded and started talking with this young man. At the time, spice, which is synthetic marijuana, was a big thing. And so they believed that this individual, due to his actions and behaviors, was high on some kind of illegal substance. They talked to him for about 20 or 30 minutes, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And they were becoming impatient with him. They knew that there was an issue. The gentleman was about 19 years old. And the victim of this crime, who was driving the car, was completely irate. He's like, this guy damaged my car, he threw watermelon on my car, and he is a complete and total a-hole, all right? I want him arrested, I want him thrown in jail. So they called me and they said, can you come out and see what's going on with this person? I said, sure. So I got and I start talking to the kid, and I talked to him for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I realized that he was autistic, I realized that he was diabetic, and I realized that that day he had come out to his parents as being gay. He had a medical condition, he had an intellectual disability, and he had a personal issue that was going on because of coming out that day. And whenever I explained to the victim of the crime, I said, listen, this kid who's 19 was trying to take some classes up at Hack. His blood sugar went low. He's autistic. This is what happened. The guy's like, I don't want anything done. I don't care about the damage to my car. I don't care about anything. When we realize where someone comes from with things, it oftentimes changes our behavior or our views of how we are dealing with them. Now, there are circumstances and incidents where we do not have the time to realize that. If somebody's physically trying to assault us or hurt us, then we don't have the time to deal with it right then and there. However, if we sometimes take a second or two and try and say, where is this person coming from? What are they doing? Where are they bringing this? Where is this anger coming from, this hostility? Then can we have some kind of empathy for whatever is going on in their lives and try and deal with it? I ended up calling the person's parents. They came out, picked them up, and drove them home. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about active listening. It's important to talk whenever you talk about any kind of active listening or verbal de-escalation, to talk about nonverbals. So there's a study that came out, it's a really popular one, and it says that 93% of conversation is nonverbal, 7% is through words. It is more important how I say things than what I'm saying. I'm going to say that again. It's more important how I say things than what I'm saying. So if somebody were to come up to me and be like, wow, love those shoes. Love them. They're awesome. Or somebody were to come up to me and say, love those shoes. They're awesome. There's a difference there, right? And we can tell that. Because which is true, the words or the meaning behind them? The meaning behind them, right? So words are 7% of what is actually being said. And if we don't take the time to actually convey what we're feeling or thinking, what we're saying isn't going to come across. 38% is through certain vocal elements, a tone of voice, and 55% is through nonverbal elements, facial expressions, gestures, posture, etc. There is a difference between me saying, what happened today? Or me saying, what happened today? There's a tone of voice difference, there's a posture difference, everything. And whenever we're dealing with something, and I see this all the time, where I was dealing with two people that had gotten into a fight. It wasn't necessarily the words that were being said, it was they're walking around, they have an attitude about them. And how do you define that? It's sometimes very hard to do. It's very hard to define an attitude, but it's important that as we're having conversations with somebody, specifically if we're dealing with somebody that's difficult to deal with, that we are mindful of our behavior, because as soon as we approach somebody or have a conversation with them, and they are different from us, or we can tell that they have an attitude, what are we going to do? We're going to reflect the attitude that they have and come across with an attitude of our own. And it is important to be mindful of that, and then as we're having conversations or dealing with people, it's important to remember that while we're talking or dealing or having conversations with others. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. What are ways to show that we care or that we are paying attention? Active listening skills. And I'm going to go across these. I will say that the next part of this presentation is what they spend a week on in hostage negotiations training. We're going to cover in about 4 minutes, but it's just to give some examples of what we do, what we teach, and ways to have conversations with others. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the first one's emotional labeling, statements of emotions heard. If you are dealing with a family member, if you are working somewhere, I will use this as an example because this was the last time I gave this presentation was at the JCC, and it was to members at their gym. So I like to use this because one of the circumstances that they said that they gave me is like, somebody comes in and they're causing us problems. They're just being irate. They're acting up. So I will use that as an example only because it was specific to the last time that I did this presentation. So emotional labeling. So when you're talking to somebody, you seem hurt, you sound angry. Paraphrasing, a restatement, putting their meaning in your own words. So if someone were to say, she's always talking and doesn't pay attention to what I say, you then say, she doesn't listen to you? And sometimes it's a question, because what we're doing is we're trying to affirm that what we are hearing is what is actually being said. Because if it's not, then it's simply, oh, I misunderstood you, let's talk about this. Go to the next slide, please. Mirroring, reflecting, repeating the last few words. She doesn't pay attention to what I say to her, and it makes me angry. It makes you angry. And it's an easy way to keep a conversation going. I will say that I am married. If my wife calls me while I am on watching TV, I do not pay attention to the majority of the things that she says, and I apologize to her, but she knows if I'm watching TV, I'm not really paying attention. And she'll be like, yeah, I'm on my way home from work. What do you want to eat? What do I want to eat? Yeah, what do you want to eat? Where do you want me to stop? Stop? And I'll keep a whole conversation going, and I really don't even know what I'm talking about. It is an example of things to do. I'm not saying that what I do is appropriate, because it 100% is not, but it's an example of things to do to keep a conversation going. Okay, if we're really trying to talk to somebody and we really care about somebody and we're trying to get information from them, then trying to do this is an appropriate way to keep a conversation going and get information from people. A lot of times, whenever I dealt with people, and I will use this as an example, I was dealing with them at the worst moment of the worst day of their lives. They were calling the police to deal with a problem that they had, a concern that they had, or an issue that they had. And sometimes I could help and sometimes I couldn't. But at the end of the day, I got very few complaints against me simply because I listened and I tried to give them some kind of counsel or advice about how to move forward and what to do next. And normally, if I listened long enough and somebody just vented and they went from up here because of the issue that they were having to down here, they were like, by the time I was done, they were like, you know what, I don't even want, my neighbor arrested for throwing a rock through my window or whatever. It's just that they wanted to vent. They were like, I don't really feel like going to court. I don't really feel like, you know what, I got really, worked up and pissed off. I don't even care anymore. Summary is periodically covering the main points. Example, okay, what you've told me so far is this, and as a result, you feel this. Do I understand you correctly? Because if we don't, then we try and figure out what's going on. If you would go to the next slide, please. Open-ended questions, questions that require more than a yes or no answer. For those of us that have kids, how was your day? It doesn't matter what you ask them. If it's a teenager, they are going to say, fine. How was your day? Fine. What happened today? Nothing. Like, you're not gonna, but the point of these is to try and elicit a longer response and get more information about somebody, about what's going on. Minimal encouragers, this is the other thing I do probably way too often to my wife. Thank God, she's never seen this presentation. So, brief responses that indicate you're present and listening. This is phenomenal. So, in a general, normal conversation that we have with people, silent pauses are the most uncomfortable thing that we will ever deal with. Whenever I present on dealing with suicidal persons, I actually talk about something different than this, because depending upon the mental illness, it may take an extended period of time for somebody to actually respond to you. And so that pause that is normal that is usual or normal in conversations, and let me say that a conversation amongst people is different based on a number of things. So I am just talking about general conversations, but a conversation with somebody that might be depressed or suicidal, a pause in that conversation could be a minute, 2 minutes long. While they're collecting their thoughts, they're physically so exhausted before they will give some kind of response. But generally speaking, whenever I will use this often just to keep the conversation going. And then this happened, and this, okay, yeah, all right, okay, what next? And it's just to keep a conversation going and hear from people. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Use of empathy, being able to identify, understand another situation's feelings and motives. It is not sympathy where you feel for somebody. If you can empathize with someone you can empathize with someone without sympathizing with somebody. And try talking to people on their level. I speak to everyone with respect, but I don't talk to a child the same as I would an adult. Okay? There are people that I will deal with, and I have to make an evaluation on IQ. And sometimes I'm wrong, but there are people that I will deal with some kind of mental deficiency, or a child, or an adult, or somebody. I dealt with an enormous homeless population for a long time, and there were varying degrees of intellectual capabilities there, and I always treated people with respect, but there is a difference in what you can tell them or what they will understand, as opposed to, I gave, this next presentation I gave a version of it to an international corporation. I gave dozens of them to lawyers at local firms, and I would talk to people the same, but the details with which you can get and some of the conversations you can have are different. So try talking to people on their level. I would not, if a child is sitting here right now, come up and talk to them like this. I would get down on their level. Go to the next slide, please. And when nothing else is working, what do? We get help. If you're at your job, another employee, a supervisor, a manager, or even the police. Okay? If you are dealing with somebody that is so hostile, so belligerent, and once again, I would like to make this perfectly clear again, that I am talking with a difficult person, all right, not somebody that is coming into a facility or a business or in a park that is actively trying to kill, hurt, maim people. All right, this is somebody that's just irate, kind of yelling, and we have a feeling that we can have a conversation with them to calm them down. Good, go to the next slide, please. What to do when nothing else is working. And once again, I've said this before, people want to feel like we have done something, even if there's not much we can do. People want to feel like they are heard. So the active listening skills are ways to allow people to feel like they're heard, and just having a conversation and letting people vent. It's what I did for 20 years. I just let people vent, and then if there was a way to help them, I would do whatever I could to do that. And I think that's what the majority of people here are doing. They're trying to find a way that we can help others. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There are exceptions and should not be considered the norm. So now I'm going to go to the other side of this. And I will talk about, be yourself when talking to people. If you're honest and upfront with people, they often see that and respect it. Sometimes being abrupt works. Negotiations with a barricaded homicidal suspect. This is where the profanity is going to come in. I had a number of negotiations over the years. Some of them were successful and some of them were not. Probably one of what I would consider my best negotiation ever, because of the success from it. Everything that I taught, everything that I learned, everything that I went over for years, I did not use a single thing. I did something completely opposite. There was an individual in Northern Regionals area that had murdered his girlfriend. He was in an upstairs second floor apartment with her, and with her body, and some friends of hers had come over, seen the body there, knew that he was there, and called the police. It was a small apartment, and a small group of us were asked to go out and try and take him into custody. When we got there, he had actively been attempting suicide and was at that time attempting suicide by cop. While talking with him, he had objects that he made to sound as if they were a shotgun. So he had a steel pipe and he was rattling it around as if it was a firearm. So I talked to him for about 2 hours, roughly. He had taken a knife and was filleting his neck and his wrists severely. I actually at one point had worked up at the hospital while I was in college and dealt with a lot of suicidal people and mentally ill people. And I can say that this is the worst non-successful suicide attempt I've ever seen. So I talked to him for about 2 hours. We talked about football. We talked about, what was going on. I said, we're not leaving. He said that he wanted to die. He wanted the police to kill him. He wanted us to go in and shoot him. And we talked, we continued to talk, and I use what we call hooks, and that's things that we may find in common or, some kind of commonality or whatnot. And his mother showed up on scene, and I went out and talked to her. And I came back, and I spoke with him some more, and I was like, hey, I talked to your mom. He's like, well, what was the note that I left? And I repeated it to him. And he was like, all right, so he believed me. He felt that I was being honest and upfront with him. And we continued to talk. And I was like, nothing that I'm saying from following all this other stuff that I've done now for 2 hours is working. And there has to be some kind of conclusion to this, resolution to this. And I'll be honest, I don't remember the guy's name. It might have been Adam, so I'll just call him Adam. I said, Adam, I said, we've been here for 2 hours. I said, it's time for you to get your ass down these stairs right now. He goes, what? I said, Adam, I've been talking to you for 2 hours. I said, this is over. We're done. You need to come down here right now. He goes, okay, Derek. I said, you better hurry the fuck up. And he's like, Derek, stop yelling at me. I'm coming down. He had actually filleted his wrist so bad that he actually had to use his feet to push him down the stairs. And whenever he got to the bottom, he was like, Derek, please don't touch me, because he was just bleeding everywhere. He was bleeding everywhere. It was traumatic. It was terrible. I use that as an example of sometimes when you do everything right in the way that the textbook tells you to do, if it doesn't, there might be something else you have to do. And if you're dealing with somebody that you're familiar with, and sometimes, and I will use this as I get older, I can now use more of a fatherly approach to things. as I talk to people, and I'll be, you know, I can have that kind of conversation as opposed to whenever I was younger and people would just be like, you know, you're too young, you don't know what you're talking about. So there are ways that you can approach people, and so being true, being honest with how you're doing things, I think is appropriate. But there are times where you might have to step outside of that and do something different. For that, it was successful. We took him into custody. He was charged with his crimes, and as far as I know, is still serving a sentence. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So that'll be it. The next presentation that I'm going to do is I'm going to have on active shooters. If anybody has any questions, we can kind of talk about those afterwards, just so we're rolling through here and people can get out of here relatively on time. So there should be a video that will play next. And it's about, and I didn't make this video. It is like the national standard for videos. If you have an issue with it, I didn't have anything to do with it. But we will play it. It's about 13 minutes long. I've watched it. If you don't enjoy it, just know that I've watched it about 127 times. So go ahead, please. Thank you.
What's your emergency? There's a gunman inside the store. We need help now.
Do anything last weekend? It was very nice, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. About is the new system enhancement. What's going to be the solution by the time we...
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Actually think he's got an old, well, he's got a truck. I don't know if your daughter would be interested. Yeah, definitely. Now, she figured out what college she wants to go to.
911, what's your emergency? We need help. There's a gunman inside the store. He's shooting the place up. We need help now.
Issues that we found. Okay, Emily, see what that is. See what's going on. Just let us know what you find out.
There's a man with a gun. He's right there.
What's the law?
Some lights. Walk it.
Right, County. There you go. You're safe for that.
There's a guy with a gun. He's shooting. Look.
James, we don't have
No, look.
Run! To the right, to the loading dock. Come on, this way. Oh, no, come in. Yeah, in here. The gunman's coming.
What are we gonna do?
We're gonna have to defend ourselves.
I can't do this.
You're gonna see your daughter tonight, okay? We are all going to go home tonight, all right? We have a right to defend ourselves.
Get the gun. Hey. Hold him down.
Come on.
so glad you're okay.
Yes, we're all gonna go home. Everybody's going home.
Yeah.
If you ever have the misfortune to be in an active shooter event, you deserve to survive. In our research, we have found that the actions that potential victims take during these events are critical to their survival. We have identified 3 options that have proven effective in many events. These are: avoid the attacker, deny the attacker access to your area, defend yourself. It is a personal decision, but you have a right to do so. Avoiding the attacker starts with being aware of your surroundings at all times and knowing what is going on around you. If you see or hear something that looks suspicious, take action. For example, the stalker took immediate and effective action to protect himself when he observed the shooter pulling out weapons from the bag. Others, however, hesitated, and this hesitation can cost them valuable time that they could have used to get away from the threat. If you hear something that is, or could be, gunfire, start trying to get away from it as soon as possible. Gunfire has a distinctive sound. Inside of buildings, the sound can be muffled or distorted. A single loud bang could be a person dropping something, or even thunder. But repeated loud bangs are much more likely to be gunfire. Additionally, look at the reaction of others. Are they startled or scared? Are they running? What are they saying? Any one of these events individually may create denial, but when put together should create a heightened awareness and stimulate an immediate response. It is important that you know how to get out. The situation will be chaotic and rapidly changing. In general, you will want to go to the nearest exit. But you must also understand that the closest exit may not be accessible or safe to use. If this is the case, go to a different exit. While avoiding the threat, consider the uses of cover and concealment. Cover offers protection from gunfire, while concealment minimizes your exposure to the attacker. Try to keep objects between you and the attacker. If you can't avoid the attacker, sometimes the best option will be to deny the attacker access to your location. In many locations, this can be accomplished by closing and locking a door, such as they did in the meeting room. Locking the door has proven effective in many attacks. If the door does not have a lock, you can place heavy objects in front of it. Remember, barricades work best if the door opens toward you. If it doesn't, use things that are readily available, such as straps, belts, or objects that can be used to block or secure the door to make it difficult for the attacker to enter the room. This may at least slow the attacker down and give you time to identify alternate means of escape, such as adjoining rooms or windows. When attempting to deny access to your location, you want to make it appear that there is no one in your area. Lock doors, turn off the lights, silence your phones, and get out of sight. Your attempt to deny the attacker access to your location might fail.
The gunman's coming.
What are we going to do?
We're going to have to defend ourselves.
Have a backup plan about what you will do. In many cases, this may be to defend yourself. You need to be in a place where you can act if the attacker comes into your location. In most rooms, you will line up against the same wall that the door is on, near the door so you can react, but not directly in front of it. If you are unable to avoid or deny, your best option may be to defend yourself by using whatever is available. In a situation where someone is attempting to kill you, you have the legal right to defend yourself. Attack weak spots such as eyes, throat, and groin. Fight to the best of your ability and do not quit until the attacker is stopped.
Get the gun!
This is what the workers in the warehouse did when they were unable to avoid the attacker and felt their lives were in immediate danger. Whatever option you choose, call 911 as soon as you are in a safe location. Provide any information that you know. The operator will ask you a lot of questions. If you don't know the answer, don't guess. Just say you don't know and only state the facts.
I'm not sure. There's 3 of us in the room. We're on the...
There's a guy with a gun, he's shooting!
This will be a complex situation, and we can't tell you what you should do in every case. What we can do is provide you with information about the options that we have found to be most effective for surviving these attacks. The ultimate choice is yours. What you do matters. Avoid the attacker. Deny access to your location. Defend yourself. Law enforcement will be entering a chaotic scene with limited information. Their first priority will be to stop the threat to your safety. The police may not know where or who the threat is. Listen and comply with their commands immediately.
Put it down, sir. Put it down. Both of you on the ground.
Police are trained to look at people's hands to assess threats. Do not have anything in your hands that could be perceived as a weapon, such as a cell phone.
Show me your hands, sir. Show me your hands. Move to us. Everybody, keep your hands up, please. Walk out the door.
If told to do so, stay where you are and do not make sudden movements. Again, follow all commands. Remember, what you do matters. Avoid the attacker. Deny access to your location. Defend yourself. Remember, ADD. You can survive.
Slide, please. No, just use this. Go to one after this. And it should be the one after this. There you go. Is everybody okay? I mean, it's not too graphic or anything, but I just like to make sure before I do this. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So what is an active shooter? The FBI defines an active shooter as an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. That's the definition by the FBI. Depending upon organization, some will label it somewhat differently, but that's the FBI. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So there is some data from 2019 per the FBI, and we'll go over that. I'm not going to bore you with too much, but go ahead and go to the next slide. So the FBI lists in those 19 years, 333 incidents. Generally, the shooter is a male. Generally, the shooter is working alone. Go ahead and go to the next one, yeah. So 21 incidents happened in Pennsylvania. PA is the 4th state in the country as of 2019 for active shooter incidents. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And this is something that I just like to kind of throw in that time period, just to kind of bring it home to the group or organization that I'm presenting at. 96 happened in businesses open to pedestrian traffic, which is the most common place for it to happen, and 15 have occurred in a house of worship. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Does it have to be an active shooter? So the one thing about this is, like, we talk about active shooter, but does it have to be somebody with a firearm? And the answer to that is no. So I would look at, there was an incident in Ohio and one in New York within the past couple of years where somebody took a vehicle and ran over a bunch of people and ultimately tried to kill as many people as possible. That wasn't a gun. We also have people, assaults with edged weapons, so knives. So go ahead and go to the next slide. But it doesn't happen locally. So, I mean, you know, Pennsylvania is number 4, right? But it doesn't happen locally, does it? Go to the next slide. North Hopewell, Winterstown Elementary, Red Lion Elementary School, a man armed with a knife attacked 11 kindergartners, 2 teachers, and a principal with a machete. That was here in York County. Once again, not a firearm, still an armed assailant, and it happened in York. Go to the next slide, please. Nickel mines. Now here we do have somebody that had a firearm. In October 2006, a gunman took hostage in a one-room Amish schoolhouse in Lancaster. A suspect shot 10 girls aged 6 to 13, killing 5 before killing himself. So these things do happen locally. They do happen in York County. This is not to terrorize people. This isn't to make them think that this happens all the time. I can say in 23 years of law enforcement, I responded to a house where 6 people were shot. I don't remember how many died, maybe 2. 6 people were shot. It was not considered an active shooter incident. Additionally, it didn't happen that far from here. It happened over on Manor Street a few blocks away. It was not considered an active shooter incident. It's probably about 12 years ago. In August of last year, an incident came across in Newberry Township. It was considered or thought to be an active shooter. It was in no way, shape, or form an active shooter. An individual shot somebody and was immediately taken into custody. However, the way the call came out, some of the information, because these are chaotic situations, the information was given out that the person, the suspect, was not in custody and that there was possibly another person there. It was on a Sunday. I just happened to be getting ready to go to the range and go to the gym. Somebody called me saying that there was an incident, and I responded. I was there within 15 minutes. There were 150, 200 law enforcement from all across York County and Pennsylvania State Police. In my position, because of what I did, I was asked to organize the search for any other potential shooter. This was in a Walmart. So this scenario, which was not an active shooter, I'd like to reiterate that, was not an active shooter, was probably the closest response that we've had in 23 years of law enforcement. But there have been times where there have been multiple victims at houses. And like I said, there was one probably 12 years ago that I went to and 6 people were shot. It wasn't labeled that way. And the intent, generally speaking, between an active shooter and a lot of the just multiple injured parties is different. And so sometimes you have to kind of take into it, what is the intent behind this? Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So what can we do? Avoid, deny, and defend. This is the best guidelines that's out right now per Texas Tech, which did some studies on this, the federal government. You can also see that depending upon the model or the organization that is giving this information, they will also call it run, hide, fight. Regardless of the verbiage of this, the ideology behind it is the same. Go to the next slide, please. So run away from the danger. One of the biggest issues in many situations is not recognize the danger and not reacting. There was a fire at a nightclub, one of the New England states, and I should have looked it up before I came, because the name of the nightclub always eludes me. But there was 100 people that were died, 230 were injured. And why was that? So we will use this room as an example. So people came in, and just imagine that this room is significantly larger, and there's a stage up here. So what are people? They are creatures of habit. So as the individuals came in, they came in through a front door, they went into a room, they stood there, and in front of them, the stage caught on fire. So what did they do? They went back the way they came without looking or noticing that there was a kitchen here that they could have walked through and walked outside, and 100 people died. It is important to be mindful of our surroundings and what is going on. And once again, while I mention the fact that things happen locally, this is not to terrorize people. This is not to put people in any kind of fear or anything like that, but it is to be mindful of the fact that sometimes things happen, and whether it be an active shooter or a fire, do we know where our fire escapes are? We just had the fire department in here a little while ago, okay? And in this circumstance, 100 people died, and they could have literally just gone out another exit. Pyrotechnics started, and they thought it was part of the show. In an active shooter situation, what's the first thing that's going to happen? A shot is going to go off, and we're going to think it's a truck driving by outside backfiring. We are going to think that it happened somewhere outside. We are going to think that it is something that it is not. And I'm not saying that anytime you hear a loud bang, you should, run out of the room or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that it is important to be mindful of the things that are happening around us. So, the first thing is to run away from danger. Second, find a safe place to go. Should probably be predetermined. And this I use for organizations, okay? And I say that there should be a predetermined place. The problem that can be created from that is, if this were to, say in this situation, be an angry or agitated member, and they know where your predetermined place is, then they could then go there also and assault people. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Deny. You know the facility better than the attacker. Determine a safe place to hide, under desks, in closets, behind locked doors. So in situations like this, I'll use this door here. It would be difficult to secure that door. However, with a belt, you could put it over the hinge up top, tighten it down, and it would be extremely difficult to open. Same with these doors here. These are what are called outward opening doors. So you can do something on the hinge. With this one specifically, there is a lock attached to it. You could tie a belt to it or part of a purse and then hold it closed. You can walk around the side and hold it closed from that you are not standing in front of the door. These are examples. It might be important. I know one of my coworkers, his wife is a teacher, and he has created some nylon rope that he gives to her in case of an active shooter incident that she can then barricade the door. Okay. I would also, and go ahead and go to the next slide because I think it's the one. Okay, yeah, this is. So there is a difference between cover and concealment. Cover protects you from a level of danger that could be attacking you, block wall, thick wall, all right? Cover is something that protects you from the level of danger that is attacking you. A chair may be able to protect you from a knife. A chair will not stop a bullet round. And then we can get into the complexities of bullet rounds themselves, but it is possible that a bullet round will go through the wall. It is 100% likely that a bullet round will go through a window. So whenever you are looking at, you're like, oh, I'm safe in here because I have walls all around me. Well, that might not be true. So it is important to be mindful of that as you are looking for a place to hide. Are there things in here that could protect you? This cabinet back here is probably thick enough to stop something. Maybe the table in the back there, but otherwise, no. So if somebody is coming in from outside, then my suggestion would be to run out the door. There is going to be a very low level of protection in here. And I'm not sure of the construction of the walls, but somebody could shoot through the walls if they wanted to. Locking doors can sometimes be problematic in, and I can't think of the school, and this is terrible also, but the one in the New England states, there was the elementary school where the attacker went in, the front. Thank you. The door was locked. He shot the glass next to the door and went through the door. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So concealment is something that will keep others from seeing you, but offers no protection. Bushes, curtains, going back, hiding behind this desk here. Generally speaking, I will say that originally, whenever I gave this presentation, I would talk about kind of the intent behind the assailant, and in some cases, like Virginia Tech, the whole purpose was to have a higher body count than the previous assailant. So, but the more that I've reviewed these and some of the other trainings that I've gone to, that is not necessarily the case. Sometimes it is an attack that is specific and targeted at something, and I will use the reference of somebody that's going into, and this is made up, but somebody that is going in to look for a spouse that is cheating, and they will then just shoot everybody on their way to do that. Concealment is something, yeah, you're fine. Concealment was something that, though, you can hide behind, but it offers no protection whatsoever. Go ahead and go to the next one. Defend. If somebody is actively attempting to kill you, you have the absolute right to defend yourself. Fight dirty. Use whatever weapons you may have at hand. Realize that even if you're hurt, you can keep fighting. If somebody is actively trying to hurt you, to kill you, you have the right to defend yourself. If somebody is trying to kill you, you have the right to defend yourself. Whether it be picking up a chair and throwing it at them, whether it be taking something and using it as a staff or whatever it might be, you have the right to defend yourself. And it is important to realize that if you are forced to defend yourself, that you keep going until they stop. Because if you just hit them once and they walk away, they're going to go outside and they're going to shoot somebody else. Go ahead and go to the next slide. What else can you do? Call the police. Generally speaking, we recommend calling from a landline if you have one. It's easier to pinpoint the location in case you can't actually talk on the phone. But who has a landline anymore? And some of this might actually date itself by the presentation itself. Leave the call open. Give as much information as you can, and use your knowledge of the building as an advantage. If somebody's coming in here because they decided to assault this and they are unfamiliar with the layout, then use that to your advantage whenever you are attempting to get out, run, or hide. Go to the next slide, please. So the 911 process and police response. They may ask a lot of questions. If anybody's ever, and I won't ask, but if anybody has ever called 911 for something, you will know, and if you have not, you must realize that they will ask a significant amount of questions, and it will be extremely frustrating, and you'll just be like, can you get somebody here right now? Police departments have an extended response time depending on the department or the area you are in. Police may only have 3 to 4 people working and may need help from other agencies. The 3 to 4 people is going to be a large number. It depends what municipality that you're living in and who's responding. That's not to bust on any police department. That is just, it is the reality of what it is. Right now, currently, I would be willing to bet that York City Police Department has 6 officers working and a supervisor. However, they might have 4 and a supervisor. What time is it? Yeah. So they might have 4 or 5 people working right now. That is, they generally speaking have the most officers working, but then it's also based on their call volume. They generally also have the highest call volume. If you look at other agencies, they might have 1, they might have 2. If you go into Pennsylvania State Police, depending upon your area, they may have 2 or 4 guys working that cover the entire county. If it's something that's going on, they will obviously have, if it's something that would be, and I will use this as an example, if it's something that is going on somewhere that Pennsylvania State Police covers, they will, and it is an active shooter where there is a shooting actively going on, then people will respond for all over. And I will once again reference the Walmart incident where you had 150, 200 cops responding from all over the country. You had park rangers responding. You had, and that's not the Boston Park, but you had park rangers responding. Anybody that had a firearm that was working that day responded. York City responded, Southern Regional, PSP, etc. So with this, you're going to have a ton of people responding. Go ahead and go to the next slide. SWAT team. SWAT team's not going to show up. This is going to be over before that, unless it turns into a barricade. And a barricaded gunman is very different from an active shooter. An active shooter is somebody that is actively, presently trying to kill somebody. We have what's called a priorities of life. Priorities of life is, the first priority of life is a hostage. The second priority of life is a victim or innocent bystander. And the third priority of life is a police officer. The fourth is a suspect or a subject. The priorities of life then make it that if there is an active shooter going on, if somebody is actively killing somebody, then we will go to that threat. If I come here and I hear gunfire and I am the only person hearing it, I will enter the building and I will go and I will neutralize that threat. I will stop it. That is what my job is. If I do not hear active gunfire, if the gunfire has stopped and the person is potentially still here, it becomes a barricade. A barricaded person is not someone that is actively killing somebody. And it changes what we do and how we handle that situation. The SWAT team, so I cover York County before I took over, well, let me take that back. Before there was a York County quick response team, PSP covered our area, covered York County. They had 2 teams, one was in the eastern part of the state, one was in the western part of the state. They had other jobs, and so if there was a barricade or a shooting and the person barricaded in a house, they would then gather their team from the eastern portion of the state and respond. Response time was 4 to 6 hours. In 2001, 2002, there was an officer that was shot in the face. He ultimately lived, but that and some other incident is what actually converted what was originally the city quick response team to the county quick response team to deal with these scenarios or these situations where there is a barricade. Generally, our response time, because of how it works, every officer that is on the SWAT team has auxiliary duties. They do other things, except for myself. But generally speaking, we go to Hanover, we go to Newberry Township, we go to Southern, we go all over the state. But these guys might be at their homes in Lancaster. If a call would come out, like an active shooter, I will put out a page, and then they will respond directly to the scene. Response time is about an hour. The active shooter situation will be over before that. If it turns into a barricade, that might not be, but otherwise it'll be over. So it is not a SWAT team that's going to be dealing with this. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There's a video that I have, and I think it kind of sums some things up. As I was doing some research on this and some other things that I've heard or seen or talked about, this is an individual that experienced an active shooter situation, and I think that his honesty and his humility with things was just something that was very important to show. And so I included, I kind of combined a couple videos together to include this at the end. So go ahead, and I think that should be the next thing.
I'm not a hero. I'm just a regular person, and I think anybody could have did what I did if they're just pushed in that kind of cage, and you have to either react or you're gonna fold. I did that completely out of a selfish act. I was completely doing it just to save myself. Now, me doing that, I did save other people, but I don't want people to think that I was the Terminator or Superman or anybody like that. It was just, I figured if I was going to die, he was going to have to work for it. Yeah, I knew I had it in me, but I haven't had any specific combat training. It's just, I had to fight my daughter every night so I can get her, put her to bed. But yeah, and I'll say it again. I didn't really fight that man to save everybody else. I know that might not be a popular thing, but I'm really honest. I'm gonna be honest to the core. I took the gun so I could get myself out. And then I went back for my friend after I was like, let me see, is he still alive? Because it was just so fast. Like, so when we first heard what I know now is the gunshot, we thought it was plates crashing because we had pretty much made that up in our minds that the plates were gonna fall. Then the second one happened, then the third one happened. I think that's when the glass busted and broke through. And then I saw the Waffle House employees scatter. And then I looked back and I saw a person laying on the ground right at the entrance of the door. So then I jumped pretty much and slid from the tabletop to the entrance of the door. And I think he let off some shots through the glass, and then he proceeded to come in. And then when he proceeded to come in, I actually went behind this like a push door, swivel door, and he shot through that door, I'm pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure he grazed my arm. And it was at that time that I kind of made up my mind, because there's no way to lock that door, that if it was going to come down to it, he was going to have to work to kill me. So at the time that he was either reloading or the gun jammed or whatever happened is when I ran through the swivel door. I hit him with the swivel door, and then the gun was kind of jammed up and it was pushed down. So we were scuffling, and I managed to get him with one hand on the gun, and then I grabbed it from him and I threw it over the countertop. And then after that, I was trying to get out the door, and I think he was pretty much in the entranceway. So I just took him out with me out of the entrance and all the way outside. And then I proceeded to run around, and he had like a walk, trot, pace type of jog that he was doing, trying to get away, and that's kind of what happened.
I've elaborated on is, first off, what do you think the shots were? Thought they were plates crashing. So they didn't even react. It was like the third shot before they realized something was going on. The third shot before they realized something was going on. And something else that I talk about is that it's difficult for me to explain this, but the general rule, because, and I say it's difficult because there are reactions that each person is going to have with circumstances like that. And so to say that this is what you should do, I can make recommendations, but there are things that people are going to innately do regardless of how you train them or what they do, right? Fight or flight. So generally, whenever I give this presentation, my statement is that this should be treated like the announcement on the airplane whenever you're going to take off. You put on your own oxygen mask first, you take care of yourself first, and then you take care of somebody else later. You being a victim of something, in this case, it's only upping the body count. Okay. Now people are like, well, I wouldn't do that, and I would stay and I would fight. Okay. I mean and I get that. I do. But that isn't what we would recommend doing. But that is something that, I mean, obviously people are going to be like, well, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. Okay. Just have a plan and make sure you know what you're doing. That's my presentations. I appreciate everybody's time. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.